Hello, everyone. Welcome to Student Voices Around the World in 90 Minutes. I'm Shannon Courtney. I am a Berkeley intern and the moderator for tonight's event. So this event is organized by the interns of the Berkeley Center and is a part of UCLA's International Education Week. So we're really excited to have you guys all here. And today's discussion brings together UCLA undergraduate students and faculty to explore cultural exchange in higher education and the global workforce. And also, I was a 2021 Global Internship Program participant in Bogota, Colombia. So I'm really excited to participate in this discussion as well with some fellow familiar faces. So before we start, I would like to go over some housekeeping rules for the panel discussion. So we are first going to begin with some introductory remarks from all of our panelists, followed by a conversation between our panelists, and then a Q&A section. And so since this panel is all about student voices, we really want to hear your perspectives and for you to participate. So you can either submit questions that you have for each participant in the chat, or use the raise hand feature to be called on, and then you'll unmute yourself and then be able to ask your question. So also to note, the event is being recorded and that everyone is welcome to turn off their cameras if they don't want to be recorded. So I'm going to first begin by introducing our amazing panelists. So first we have Justin Chen. He is a third-year poli-sci major and entrepreneurship minor at UCLA, and he's from Auckland, New Zealand, and Taipei, Taiwan. He has interned at PwC Legal, Eminent Venture Capital, and LCS and Partners, and hopes to specialize in mergers and acquisitions, private equity, and cross-border investments within corporate law internationally. Our next panelist is Wudia Kamara. She's a third-year double majoring in economics and international development studies. She participated in the Global Internship Program this summer virtually, where she was a business development intern at Agilis Advisors, an advisory company in Berlin, Germany. We also have Adnan Shabib, who is a third-year mathematics of computation and economics double major at UCLA. He attended international schools in Bahrain and Jordan and currently works within the International Student Representative Office and serves as the International Student Ambassador for Bahrain. We also have a special guest in the audience, Italia Garcia Tang, who is the USAC International Student Representative for the 2021 to 2022 academic year. And she's going to be in the audience and she's going to be engaging in questions, providing resources, and raising hand and joining the discussion when she feels that she would like to. For our faculty panelists, we have Professor Shalom Staub, who's the director of the UCLA Center for Community Learning. He's been involved in community engaged program development for over his 37-year professional career in all aspects: state government, the private non-profit sector, and higher education. And he also has developed and now teaches a course on intercultural communication for the globalized workplace, as available to students who want to participate in the Global Internship Program. So we're going to have Professor Staub take it away with his introduction.
Thank you, Shannon, and I'm delighted to be with everybody. I do feel, though, that me being the first speaker on a panel of student voices, that's just, there's something wrong about that. So maybe the best thing for me to do is take you all back to many years ago, actually, when I was a junior and senior in high school. This was like 1972, 1973. One of the things that I thought about when choosing the university that I was interested in was, would it give me an opportunity to study abroad? And that was a deciding factor. Now, at that time, my life plan was totally different. My life plan was to become a rabbi. And so I chose a university that had not only a good Jewish studies program, but an opportunity that would allow me to study for a full year in Israel. So I get to college, and in one of my first semesters, I took an anthropology course, and boy, my head just got turned around. And within a year, I was like, I'm done with my plans to become a rabbi. I want to become an anthropologist. And what really got me was the way that anthropology gave me a language and a conceptual framework to understand my own experience. I mean, as an American Jew in the 1960s, I felt like an outsider in this country. And it's an experience that a lot of ethnic minorities and racial minority individuals feel when you don't experience yourself as part of the majority culture. And I didn't have a language for that until I really got into the study of anthropology and the study of culture. And the study of culture is what took me into the exploration of intercultural communication. So that's kind of the connection that led from my early student days to what became, a kind of an academic and intellectual journey. For me, culture is a very dynamic concept. Unlike when if you were to travel right now and you're going to do an internship, you're going to work abroad, and you say to yourself, how do I find out what I need to know? Well, the literature, the internet is full of resources like 10 things you need to know to do business in Japan, 10 things you need to know to communicate in South Africa. Well, those approaches are based on some assumption that culture is some static, homogeneous thing, but it's not. As we know from our own experiences in being who we are in our own countries and places, there are many cultures and subcultures and competing cultures and contesting cultures and emerging cultures. And so trying to think about intercultural communication in this more dynamic context became really an interesting and challenging thing that I wanted to explore. And so over the course of my own studies and as an undergrad and as a graduate student, and then working in different contexts, I was really keenly aware of how do you navigate across cultural differences? And how do you communicate effectively across cultural differences? And the tendency is to, or one tendency is to kind of say that they're not there. Like we all want to be one. We all want to get along. And then there's this erasure of cultural difference in the interest of creating a kind of common humanity. But there's a danger in that because people want to be seen. People want to be recognized for who they are. And if you shut down and ignore the realities of people's experience and you assume that you're communicating effectively, you're probably not communicating effectively because you're not listening and you're not hearing. And you may be communicating in ways that are actually communicating in negative ways around issues of privilege that shut people down from listening to you. So, as I became, had the opportunity and taught in Japan, and created a joint US-Japanese student research team to investigate issues of aging in our respective countries. As I designed programs later, immersive courses to bring students into places like Israel and Palestine to understand issues of conflict, and places like Morocco to understand the dynamics of a traditional and contemporary pull and push of a society. There were really interesting, exciting challenges to think about how to build programs that could bridge differences. And for me, one of the critical issues in thinking about intercultural communication and intercultural communication competence is to pay attention to a framework that I think has 4 parts. It includes developing people's motivation, the desire to want to bridge cultural differences, developing attitudes and dispositions to understand oneself and others in respectful and humble ways, and developing a knowledge base of other cultures, because there is so much to learn, and then developing skills to navigate communication skills, conflict resolution skills, really practical kinds of skills. And to take students on a journey, as the journey that I myself experience, but also that I continually experience as a newcomer to LA since 4 years ago, finding myself in entirely new contexts and entirely new cultural environments here compared to the East Coast. We all go through this of moving from what I might call unconscious incompetence, like you don't even know what you don't know, to conscious incompetence, like you're starting to learn that you really don't know what you don't know, to conscious competence, like you're really working to figure out, okay, I'm in this context, there are different rules, there are different values operating here. I'm really focusing and working on it. And ultimately to unconscious competence, the kind of fluency and bicultural understanding that one gains through repeated and really intentional effort of crossing boundaries. So that's a little bit of a taste of how I approach it and how I've experienced it, and how I encourage you as students to think about your own journeys. The fact is that international education is one of the highest impact educational experiences that anybody can have in their lives, no matter which direction you're traveling, from the US abroad to the US, within the US, in different international contexts. If education is about opening one's mind, then international education is opening one's mind on steroids. Because whether you like it or not, you are confronting things that you know you don't know. And it's I hope, and my experience, it sparks a curiosity for learning. And it's the kind of curiosity for lifelong learning that I think is so critical, beyond your undergraduate degree, and how it takes you through really exploration through the rest of your life. I'm going to stop there. I hope that is a kind of a good start to the conversation, and I can't wait to hear our student panelists.
Thank you so much, Professor Staub, for that profound introduction for our student panelists about intercultural communication. So now we're going to pass it over to Justin Chen.
Thank you, Professor. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Justin. And as Shannon said earlier, I'm from Auckland, New Zealand, and Taipei, Taiwan. And I would consider myself a bit of a cosmopolitan because I spent the first 14 years of my life in Auckland, New Zealand, and Parnell, Auckland. That's where I attended primary school. But then my parents, because of work, had to move to Taipei, Taiwan. So I lived in Taipei for the next 4 or 5 years as an expat. And there that was my first experience of truly like an international environment, because not only did I live in an expat area, but I also attended an international school representing some 30 nationalities. So I would say having that experience was definitely extremely helpful. I'm accustomed to respecting cultural differences, being observant and also aware of cultural differences. Not only that, through high school and through undergrad, I've had internships both here in the US and also in Taipei, Taiwan. So I've had the opportunity to intern at PwC's Taipei office at PwC Legal as a corporate legal intern. I worked on mainly cross-border investment, cross-listing regulations. So there I was really working with predominantly Taiwanese colleagues, but mostly Western educated Taiwanese coworkers. I was also frequently in contact with American attorneys. And after that, I interned at Eminent Venture Capital, which is a Taiwanese venture capital firm that primarily processes American and Canadian investment into Taiwanese tech startups. So there I was predominantly dealing with a North American sort of Western, set of people, you know. And after that, I interned at LCS Partners, which is Taiwan's second largest private equity corporate M&A firm. And there I was predominantly dealing with cross-border investment, cross-border like restructuring and private equity cases. So there I was also in frequent contact with just clients over in North America. So I would say when I first came over to California to attend UCLA, I didn't experience much of a cultural shock, probably because English is my native language, so there wasn't a language barrier. And I would say my 4 years of high school in an international, but sort of in an American curriculum as well, sort of prepared me for sort of cultural expectations here as well. But I do realize that due to a multitude of reasons, maybe language barriers, maybe a genuine cultural shock, that a lot of international students find it hard to adjust to life in California, which is why me and two other friends, Frederick and Mitch, we started a student organization called Bruins Down Under, just as a organization for Australians and New Zealanders here at UCLA who may find it hard at first to adjust to American life. We're there to provide support and sort of ease their transition into life here at UCLA. Yeah, that'll be all for my self-introduction. And Wudia, you're welcome to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here. I'm excited to be here with you all. So a little bit about me. I was born in Rhode Island, but grew up in Sierra Leone and moved to California to finish high school. And now I'm LA, UCLA. So that kind of like sets up the tone for my intercultural experience based on like my personal background. But I want to talk more about this past summer, wherein I got the opportunity to intern as a business development intern at advisory company in Berlin, Germany, participating in the Global Internship Program with Shannon as well. And I would say I honestly didn't know what to expect going into that internship, like given my little exposure to the field of investment and prior to, but I knew that I wanted to overall like improve my intercultural communication skills, which I did. So my supervisor was my sole contact throughout my internship, and he lived in the Netherlands. So I was able to like learn from our cross-cultural differences, and most importantly, in reaching out to like many, like over 600 companies across like Africa and Europe as well. And since I got to intern remotely, most of the cultural differences I recognized were based on communication styles. So one thing that my supervisor did mention to me briefly was like, hey, maybe when communicating with people from African startups or African business partners, you have to like look out for their titles, make sure you're calling people like Mr. and Mrs. So that kind of like took me like an additional step to like go into people's bios on LinkedIn to make sure that I had the right titles for them. And then when communicating with like firms from America, it would be like the first name. So it was just like understanding those little things, which wasn't strange to me because of my Sierra Leonean background, where people would be, prefer going by their titles instead of first names. But it's something that I have stopped doing ever since like I moved to California, because like no one says Mr. or Mrs. over here, you know what I mean? But just those little things were just that were things that stood out to me. And I would say that I didn't really have a cultural shock because I went in with like an open mind, ready to absorb as much multicultural information as I could, and without constantly using my Sierra Leonean or American cultural norms as a basis for comparison. And I would say that one thing that really helped was a resource. So the intercultural communication class, which was taught by Professor Staub, actually was a really good resource for navigating my cultural experience in that internship program, because it did equip me like with adequate tools for gaining intercultural competence. And intercultural competence is the idea of like acquiring a set of skills to be able to enact like effective and appropriate communication with people from different cultural backgrounds. So prior to the internship and prior to that class, and like most people on this call who seek to work in global diverse settings and travel the world, I used to think that reading a blog post online about quick guides to a specific country would be quite enough for me to personally and professionally thrive in that country. However, after taking the class, I learned that one of the greatest impediments to intercultural communication learning is adopting limited modes of learning, like blogs online or standardized metrics of cultural behavior, like the mayor's culture map, conflict style inventories, and like things like Hofstede's value orientation model. And I came to understand that while these generalized guides are significant and can be useful, they're very limited and do not encompass the diversity of cultures. So learning how to learn to adapt to various cultural modes of communication in any given setting is key to retaining intercultural competence, which could be like the foundation for intercultural communication. So that being said, I would say my whole summer experience kind of like taught me to know that no ethnicity or culture is entirely homogeneous. And so it is very important to have like a framework for understanding how people interact across various cultures, but do not participate in enabling ethnocentrism because by enhancing cultural stereotypes, because the problem with cultural stereotypes isn't that they are like untrue or not factual, but it's that they're incomplete, like they do not tell the full story. And so like kind of like adhering to that can just like block you or not enable you to like learn as much as you could from an intercultural experience. So, but I'm happy to like talk more about this as we go on. I can talk like over and over. I can talk like on and on and on about that class. It was really great opportunity to be in that. But yeah, I'll pass it on to Adnan.
Thank you, Wudia. Hello, everyone. My name is Adnan Shabib. I'm a third year here at UCLA studying computational mathematics and economics. I've lived in both Bahrain and Jordan prior to attending UCLA, and I've lived in both countries for around 9 to 10 years. I'm currently working at the International Student Representative Office with Italia as the Academic Affairs Director, and I'm also serving as the International Student Ambassador for Bahrain. One of the biggest challenges that I encountered when moving from the Middle East to the United States was having to leave the community that I've grown in since I was a child. For the last 18 years, basically. I was excited, like, don't get me wrong, I was very excited to come to UCLA. It was like a very big opportunity and such, but I'm not gonna lie to you, having to live halfway across the world from basically my life was very scary. And it was hard at the start, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I found the best way to deal with this kind of stuff was to make the effort to make new friends and to try and integrate yourself within the society. So I did that by joining different cultural clubs and just basically struck up conversations with anyone I had come across. And then I found my own community within the broader UCLA community, and it made it much easier for me to be happy and enjoy myself here at university. So as for culture shocks, I've had many, but I wouldn't necessarily call them big. So I'm going to call these my mini culture shocks. So for one, I was living on the hill. And I decided to call an Uber for the first time because my friends were down at Santa Monica and I wanted to go join them, sorry. So I called the Uber, and what do I do when the Uber comes? I go and sit in the front seat right next to him. So the Uber driver comes, he looks at me a bit weird, like not enough space in the back. So then we had like a very nice conversation about how different cultures and all that cultural differences, because back in Jordan and back in Bahrain, it would be seen as basically rude if you didn't come and sit up at the front. So yeah, that was definitely interesting. Another instance is lunch and dinner times. So my friend told me, hey, do you want to get dinner at 5 p.m.? I was like, you mean lunch? Nope, dinner. And a bunch of other these things, like the way people dress out in public is different. When I was first heard the term, have a good one, have a good what? Have a good one, have a good day, apparently that's what it means. And also the fact that shops close very early here. I used to go shopping at 9 p.m. back home. Now everything's closed at 9 p.m. here. Also, in terms of education, I think one of the things that blew me away was the idea of participation being part of the grade of projects and certain assignments. Back at home, our grades are basically fully calculated from a couple of exam scores. So if you end up waking up on the wrong side of the bed the day of your exam, well, there it goes. You're going to have to repeat next year. But here, I took a class this one time where 50 or over 50% of the grade was based on participation, and that blew me away. Like unheard of back home, unheard of. Another thing that was very bizarre to me was the idea of general education requirements. Back home, in the final 2 years of high school, you should really be deciding what field you want to go in. If you want to become a doctor, you should start taking your biology, your math, your chemistry classes. If you want to be an engineer, math and physics, et cetera, for everything. But here, I was able to add on economics as my second major, my third year here at UCLA, and only because of this general education requirement situation. And I've grown to appreciate it. I think it's a really cool thing. UCLA has provided a lot of ways for me to navigate the cultural differences. One of the most important resources that I would love to emphasize is the Dashu Center, who they provide a multitude of different events geared towards international students, like exploring LA, international food fair, game nights. It really, these events really helped me like understand different cultures and value the importance of cultural exchange. And they also did a bunch of workshops, such as language circles to strengthen your spoken English, and health and financial workshops. A couple of my favorite workshops were the how to file taxes as international students, because that's a doozy, and introductory American politics, because who doesn't like to learn about that? And that, I think that'll be all. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you everyone for your wonderful introductory remarks and all. It's been really interesting to hear all the different cultural shocks you've faced in the US, all your experiences and beyond abroad as well. So moving on to our general questions for discussion. As just a note to the audience, Professor Staub is leaving at 6 because he is teaching a class. He is a busy professor at UCLA. And so I really wanted to first go more in depth about his teaching experience in intercultural communication. And then it's free to everyone in the panel to discuss this. So Professor Staub, my question for you is that in your teaching experience, we talked about intercultural communication. So I was wondering, what are some of the greatest issues that you see students facing when navigating these cultural differences, especially in like international and multicultural settings when they're dealing with differences with people they're working directly with?
Thanks, Shannon. It's a great question. And I'm not sure how to do it justice because the answers can be so varied. I mean, we've heard right on this panel, the varied experiences of students moving from one cultural context to another, even within a single country or across international borders. I think one of the biggest challenges overall is feeling overwhelmed. When you are in a new cultural environment and you don't really know the rules and everything feels strange. I mean, the food tastes strange, and the sounds, the sound of the language, just is strange because you're not fluent in it. You're not accustomed to the rules. Like as Adnan said, I mean, you expect to be able to go shopping at 10 o'clock, but hey, the stores are closed. So things that are unfamiliar, and if it happens enough, I think one of the challenges is it just starts feeling overwhelming. And then there's the temptation to kind of, particularly today, with easy access on internet and Zoom and everything, to just retreat back into cultural familiarity. And be on your phone and be connected, even when you're in an intercultural environment, but kind of isolate yourself in your own cultural zone and distance yourself from the cultural differences around you. I think that that's a natural reaction. It's part of the kind of an expected learning curve even. And if that's one of the challenges, then I think the issue is to remind yourself why you embarked on this. Like, why did you travel to, not just to eat McDonald's, in another part of the world, but like to seek out new experiences. And so I always like to encourage students with whom I speak about these kinds of issues is to kind of put that first principle in the forefront of one's mind, which is remind yourself why you're doing this. It's to expand your horizons, not to, stay in the comfort zone of cultural familiarity. And the other principle here is that learning should be uncomfortable. I mean, there's a dimension of learning that if it's not making us uncomfortable, I'm not sure that we're learning. So recognizing that all learning, whether it's studying chemistry or, studying sociology or studying architecture, there's a challenge in it. There's a dimension to it that pushes us beyond what we already know. And it's the same thing for cultural learning. So, so I would stay focused, at least in my answer, Shannon, on this challenge of being overwhelmed, the initial desire to retreat back into familiarity, and then the opportunity that it presents every one of us to expand our horizons.
Thank you for that response. I think that's actually a really good segue to asking the full panel of students, going to the idea of like encountering the unknown and being comfortable with being uncomfortable in these, because as everyone here, even if you went abroad from the US to somewhere else or came from somewhere else to the US, you've probably encountered these moments where you would feel more comfortable being with your own group, your own cultural identity and like the people who align with that cultural identity. So is there any experiences anyone wants to talk about of having either here or abroad in work experiences or just academic experience of like having to confront the unknown or being comfortable with being uncomfortable?
I can touch on that. I would say, I think I start to think about it as about like making the strange familiar. And so when I came to the US to complete my high school education, so I moved to high school in 11th grade in Fontana, right? And having had like most of my primary and middle school education in Sierra Leone, there's like a huge difference in terms of like how the educational system works. And coming here, it was just like very bizarre to see like, oh, there are classes that you're supposed to take. You take all the same classes, you take all the same classes and whatnot, and then you would have like all various classes that you have to take. And for me, I had always I had like this structure where I would only take business classes because those are the things that I was interested in. But high school here was completely different. So it was like very much overwhelming, but at the same time, I found it a little bit more, I guess, manageable to do because I had come from an educational system that was very much strict. And when I heard that, oh, you could retake a test in my geology class in high school, I was like, what? You could retake a test? I was like, then do I even have to study? But it's just things about like, just things like that. I was like, oh my God, I'm impressed about it, of how like the American education system works in comparison to like the one I had. So I think just having those shifts was kind of good, but for me, it was just about being like comfortable with being uncomfortable, because if I hadn't done that, then I wouldn't be at UCLA right now. So I think it was just like a wild experience, but I think my education experience from Sierra Leone, which was most like a British standard one, kind of like complemented the American one quite well, I would say.
Thank you for that response. Justin, did you have your hand raised? Did you want to add anything about your experience?
Yeah, so I was going to elaborate on being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So as we kind of all know, I guess within sort of like a Western upbringing, we're taught to be sort of confident, not necessarily like overconfident or outspoken, but we're told to basically be straight, be really straightforward with what we're capable of and basically take credit where credit's due. And that's actually an interesting cultural difference in comparison to East Asia. You know, when I was interviewing for my job at LCS Partners, and even when I was working there, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to go about presenting certain ideas to my superiors, how I should maybe respond to their questions about, oh, do you have relevant experience in the area, or how good do you think you are? Like questions that are sort of directed at my abilities or sort of gauging my experience. I wasn't sure how confident I should come across, because in East Asia, there's definitely this culture of humility. There's definitely this this norm of you shouldn't, even if you're capable, even if you deserve credit in certain situations, you should probably take a step back and maybe downplay yourself a little as a show of humility. So that's an interesting phenomenon that I sort of personally observed.
Yeah, and to add on to what's already been said, an experience of mine that was like probably the turning point was actually the first time I came to the United States by myself. So I came for the first time when I was a freshman by myself to the dorms and everything, and that was definitely a very interesting experience. I was very nervous and everything. Like, I didn't know what was going on. It was the first time I was away from family away from friends. But then after that whole, like after week one came in, week two, we started like going back into getting into UCLA life, accustomed to UCLA life. I realized that at the end of the day, it's all gonna be okay. Like, we just have to be, in the moment, it may seem a bit daunting, whether it is to join a new club, whether it is to meet someone new. It's just, at the end of the day, it's always gonna be all right. I think that's the biggest key takeaway that I found from all this.
Thank you guys for all your responses. That was really informative and really interesting to hear how everyone had different experiences, like making the strange familiar and encountering the unknown. I wanted to bring up the concept of ethnocentrism at UCLA. Is there any ways that you guys have seen as students or even as faculty of just seeing it within the student body, or with maybe, for example, the classes that are taught, the availability of classes, even despite UCLA being kind of propelled as this diverse, inclusive institution, ways that you've seen like preferential treatment to certain cultural understandings and upbringings, and maybe like a lack of creating an environment where people can come together and talk about different cultural upbringings and some things like that. Anyone can start. Professor, you can start, or any of the students can start.
You know, as a professor, it's a hard question to answer, Shannon, because unlike students, I don't have the opportunity to shop around and take courses all over the university. So, you know, I'm really, I lead a unit at the university that sponsors the Community Engagement and Social Change minor. It's an interdisciplinary minor that focuses largely around community issues in Los Angeles, but students are also quite interested in doing community engaged work all around the country and all around the world. But because we're so community engagement focused, we really take it seriously to design our courses in ways that really recognize diversity and inclusion, both in terms of creating opportunities for students to work in diverse community settings while being part of a course, but also trying to create inclusive classroom experiences for students from diverse backgrounds within the class. I don't know, based on your question, Shannon, it almost sounds like that you're suggesting maybe that's not very representative, or that's not altogether representative across UCLA. I guess in my little corner of UCLA, that's specifically what we try to do. I hope that students have experiences, where they feel included across all of their courses, but let's hear.
Well, while everyone's thinking, I think I can also, as I mentioned in the very beginning, I actually was a global internship participant as well for Bogota, Colombia. And that was a really important, very transformative experience for me, especially because my career aspiration is to go into foreign diplomacy. And so working with international communities is really important. I think something that I've noticed, and I think other students can speak on in a second, is depending on your major, your minor, or what different sector you're focusing on within UCLA, the opportunities to engage in different discourse around intercultural, not even intercultural communication, but international issues and events in general, and being able to understand different cultures really depends on what's available within your different programs at UCLA. Does any of the student panelists want to say anything about that?
I can begin. I've had like relatively, I don't think I have anything particularly bad to talk about in terms of culture, like not culture, just the situations I've had being an international student at UCLA. But one thing that that came about during the COVID pandemic was I was back home in Jordan throughout fall quarter 2020, and I was taking this one class which had a required examination at 2 a.m. Jordanian time. That was absolutely not fun. So me and a couple of my friends were also back in Europe/Middle East area. We decided to compose an email to the professor asking them, oh, is there any way we can either reschedule the exam or make up some other form of examination, because a 2 a.m. exam did not seem like what we wanted to do. But thankfully, the professor was very kind to create a second time zone for the examination. Instead of making it 2 a.m., made it 2 p.m. the following day. And he ended up coming and proctoring us for the exam. Like he had to stay up a bit, and thankfully made the sacrifice to stay up slightly late. And we really did appreciate that, me and my friends in the class.
Justin, do you want to add your feedback as well?
Yeah, I would say from my personal experiences, UCLA has done a great job of being culturally mindful and inclusive, at least in terms of all the poli-sci operatives I've taken. Some classes, the underlying assumptions that everyone in the class is American. Obviously, when we talk about electoral politics in the US, or say like a class like American Political Thought, but some of the other classes that I've taken, say like a research seminar in comparative politics, obviously we look at like governmental structures and democratic backsliding in different countries. So there, that sort of presupposition went away. So I suppose it varied from class to class for me, but I'd say overall UCLA has done a pretty good job.
To add on to that, like you mentioned, Shannon, I would say for me, I have kind of like saw a lot of like international inclusiveness because of the programs that I'm in. So for me, it's like something I chose to do. So I'm not quite sure how students outside of programs like IDS, specifically International Development Studies, would feel about that. So because I'm International Development Studies and I have econ, I tend to take econ classes that are quite more on global issues as well. So for example, Econ 111 that I'm taking right now is a theories of development class. So we have case studies that we're working on where people get to represent different countries and talking about the economic factors within those countries. And then from there, you see how people always try to do like their home countries or various developing countries, and you see how people have different backgrounds, and you're like, oh my God, I'm in this space with literally a lot of international students or people who have a lot of international experiences, but I'm not quite sure how that is like integrated into like other classes at UCLA that are much more, have like a niche focus in like subject area. But I would say outside of that, I think one thing that I have seen so far, because I'm a resident assistant and I do on my floor, I have like a lot of international students on my floor. And one thing that's brought to concern about classes is like accessibility in terms of like, oh, like virtual options or being able to like go back home and be able to take these classes, or having to stay here during like the pandemic, which is like literally a bit more expensive in comparison to staying at home. So it's all about those accessibility issues. But I would say wanting to have that diversity of international education, if it's something that you want for yourself, you can definitely like acquire it, but I'm not sure how well it's integrated into like every other field of study at UCLA.
Thank you guys for your commentary about that subject. I think it's really important to discuss, and I think something interesting about UCLA, and I do think UCLA is making a really great effort with, for example, International Education Week and all of its international programs, to include students from diverse backgrounds and diverse programs at UCLA. For example, I think UCLA is one of the only institutions that I know of that allows like engineering students that are in these really rigorous, tightly restricted education curriculums to like actually participate in study abroad programs. So I think UCLA try to do a good job of integrating everyone to develop intercultural communication and international competence. So a question I have for the students is, I wanted to maybe get your perspective or your involvement on, get an understanding of your involvement on campus. And so are any of you guys in international, not international, but just leadership positions in cultural organizations, student organizations on campus? And what made you want to be participating in those cultural organizations at UCLA? Oh, Justin, you can go first.
Yeah, so I myself am a part of, I'd say, 2 student organizations that are geared towards international students. Well, one not really geared towards international students, but I founded Bruins Down Under, like I said in my introduction, with 2 of my friends, knowing that there currently isn't a student organization for students from Oceania. So I've had an opportunity to really meet people from the same part of the world. We resonate on a lot of issues regarding getting accustomed to life in the United States and making that sort of transition. But I suppose for Australians and New Zealanders, due to the cultural proximity we have with just Americans in general, we tend not to have a problem adjusting to life here. But the other student organization that I'm in is TASA, Taiwanese American Student Association. I joined that organization partly because I just want to connect with the Taiwanese Americans, people who sort of share my cultural background, my parents' cultural background, my ancestry, and just to sort of explore Taiwanese American culture as well, just because I personally found it interesting.
Would you like to go?
Oh yeah, for sure. For me, my 2 cultural clubs would be the Black Business Student Association. I joined that club because I've always wanted to be a part of a business club at UCLA, but I wanted something that felt a little bit more close to home. And for me, it's been a great opportunity to just like network and connect with all the Black students who share the same mindset to pursue like higher heights in business opportunities. And the second one is Brun Polyglot Society. So I'm bilingual in English and Sierra Leone Creole, and language learning has been something that I've been very much interested in since I was a kid. My parents, both of them combined, speak about 10 to 12 languages, because like this is saying that the average African speaks 4 languages. It is true. I don't speak 4 languages because I'm not that average African. I hope to be. So I've always like been so fascinated about the idea of language learning, and I think it's a unique way to like immerse yourself in different cultures. And with my passion for international education or international experiences, I'm part of that club, so I get to connect with other students who are learning various languages, who it's their native language. So having that non-traditional classroom setting has been really helpful. So I'm currently learning French and Spanish, mostly Spanish, and it's been great just having that community to speak with, interact with, and just learn more about different cultures.
Okay, so for my 2 clubs, I would say the first one would be the International Student Ambassador Program, which is a program run by the Dasher Center here at UCLA. Basically, we have 20 different ambassadors, all from different countries from around the world. who come, and we're basically trying here to make a change for international students. So we'll put that point to the side. Firstly, why I enjoy the ambassador program is because I met so many different people over the last 2 years I've been in it. And cultural exchange has always been something that I really, really enjoyed. Throughout high school, like I made friends from all over the place, from Germany to Mexico to China to Australia. It's been like, I really, really enjoyed learning about different cultures. We find friendships within our similarities and differences. Like, it's so interesting to see how different people do something so differently for the same means. I don't know. I don't have an example right off the top of my head, but it's really fun. And also the International Ambassador Program, we do a bunch of things for international students. We advocate for them throughout through the departmental programs, and we also create social events as well. So it's always fun to meet new people from different backgrounds. The second one I would like to highlight is the Arab American Association of Engineers and Architects. So what we do is basically kind of like a professional and social club situation where we hold a bunch of different career development workshops, resume workshops, all of that stuff. So we get to know more about the industry, tackling engineering from an international perspective, where we're all trying to find jobs without real, with the OPT, CPT situation, that fun stuff. But also like getting to know people from my culture and, socializing.
Thank you for all of your, first off, thank you for all your leadership experience at UCLA and the student organizations, and thanks for sharing it today. So I just want a little quick note that Professor Staub has to go at 6. So I was wondering, Professor Staub, if there's anything you would like to tell students who maybe are deciding if they want to participate in international programs, whether it be in education or the workplace, and maybe some advice for them going forward.
The advice is do it. If you have the opportunity to do international experience, just grab it. But I also want to say, international is not the only kind of intercultural experience. And there are so many opportunities for intercultural experiences, informal and formal. I mean, right here on campus, just the number of clubs that was just mentioned by Justin and Wudia and Adnan. I mean, multiply that out by the number of student leaders and clubs, the opportunity just right here on campus. And then LA is just, the world is in LA. And it's definitely one of the reasons me here is to be in such a cosmopolitan place. So whether it's through informal opportunities to encounter people from diverse cultural backgrounds, or the opportunity to study or work in different cultural or international contexts, grab the opportunity. If I can respond to Arya's question that was in the chat. Arya asked, does anyone feel that in trying to make the unfamiliar familiar, that you had to change? At any point did you feel that you're being assimilated? It's such an interesting question. And I think that there's a bottom line to that question, where if there are elements of your experience that feel unethical or immoral or inappropriate or violate your own cultural rules and norms, you have agency not to go there. But the point of intercultural experiences and the point of international experiences is actually to experience other experiences. So I don't interpret assimilate as a bad thing when it's in the context of so my definition of intercultural communication competence is to be able to learn the appropriate rules and norms and patterns of behavior, and yes, adjust yourself to those norms and patterns of behavior so that you can make connections with people. It doesn't mean that you give yourself up or deny who you are in any fundamental way, but it does mean that you add to your degrees of competence to be able to move in different ways in different circles and different cultures. So I love the question because it's really a profound question, and it speaks to a really core issue of who are we in essence? What is our identity? But I don't actually accept the premise if the premise is that we shouldn't know how to adapt, or we shouldn't know how to modify our behavior. I mean, Justin's example of working in an Asian setting versus working in an American setting is a very powerful example. And in a globalized world where so many of you, as you know, in your life experience, you're going to be working and encountering people from so many more places around the world than certainly, you know, it was in my experience as a 20-year-old, you know, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So the world is different. And so we want to have that ability to fluently move in and out and across different environments, you know, that Adnan can move and feel comfortable now here in LA and at UCLA, but obviously also feel comfortable when he goes back home. It doesn't mean that when a person does that, that they've given something up. It means, from my perspective, that they've gained something. So maybe this isn't enough time, but let's question what is the issue here about assimilation. Yes, bad if there's an idea that you're forced to give up something. Yes, that's bad. But when it's your own agency to figure out how to navigate a complex world, I'd argue that's good. With that, actually, everybody, I have to rush to class. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Shannon. And I'm glad to be with everybody in the audience.
Thank you so much. Good luck with class.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, so thank you so much, Professor Stahl, for coming to the panel. Does any of the student panelists want to comment on what Professor Stahl was saying, or should we move into questions? Yolanda is raising her hand. Yolanda, you can unmute if you would like to speak out loud.
Thank you. I was just wondering if there is any opportunities for the sociology major on the international experience. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I don't believe anyone on the panel is a sociology major, but throughout International Education Week, there's various international programs being available. For example, study abroad, which, for example, Wudia and I participated in through the Global Internship Program. They allow different majors to participate in different programs abroad. So what I think that's a really cool thing about UCLA, which we were kind of talking about in regards to ethnocentrism, is that that UCLA allows people from different backgrounds, institutions, and majors and minors to participate in different programs. So yes, it is available for sociology. So Arya in the chat asked the panelists, what did you learn about yourself and your identity during your experience in the US or abroad? I'll give the panel a second and then anyone can start. Maybe be about, oh, go ahead, Wudia.
Okay, I had to think about that one, but I would say one thing that I learned about, I'm trying to look up the question again, about myself and identity during my experience in the US or abroad, it would be code switching. So code switching, not only for like professional and non-professional settings, but so the way I speak or interact with my peers in school at UCLA is quite different from the way I interact with my family who most of them are Sierra Leonean and Guinean, and just like the way I interact with them. Because there's like a lot of like cultural dynamics that I know they are not very like familiar with when you compare it to like the typical like American teen life or whatnot. So it's always like, I guess for me, it's very like funny to see how like I can be talking like very nice or just like saying things like very quite differently. And then when I pick up the phone to like talk to my mom or my dad, everything just changed. My tone changes, like the way I speak all like changes everything. And then my roommates sometimes go like, is that the same person? I'm like, yes, but you have to understand like there's just like different ways of like communicating with people. And for me, I didn't ever view that as like a way of like living a double life, but it's just as Professor Stubb was saying, like you gain some, you lose some, and it's just like nice to you have to understand that you cannot, sometimes you have to like assimilate to different settings and the cultural dynamics that they require, and not feel that you have to be the same person in every situation or settings like where you find yourself.
Thank you for that response. Justin, you had your hand up. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was going to say my experience working in Taiwan and East Asia in general definitely made me sort of more acute and more aware of the sort of intertwining nature between my cultural upbringing and my system of beliefs, be it political, be it just like moral. So I just became a lot more aware of those connections there, because I used to just make a lot of presuppositions. Like I just presume that sometimes the people that I'm talking to were operating on the same ideological plane, the same moral plane, but that's not necessarily true. I just became more mindful of that through my experiences overseas.
Thank you for the really good question. But I want to like really reiterate what Wudia said. I really see myself doing that too, code switching and all that. It's definitely not a bad thing. It's just interesting to see how things have changed over like how I've evolved as a person the last 2 years I've been at UCLA. Like before, I would say like I was very much a different, like I would call myself, like some Jordanian, Middle Eastern person. But now I don't know how to explain it, but like I've shifted my identity, not identity. Like I've become kind of assimilated more into US culture, which is again what Professor Staub said. It's not a bad thing. It's just different and unique. Like I found like my own, like I've taken what I like about both like cultures and stuff and like created my own identity, I guess, in a way.
Thank you for those responses. There was a question in the chat from Simon. Does he want, I can read that, or does anyone else have any questions? Okay. So
actually, sorry, I had a question for all the panelists. So I'm an international student as well. I'm in India. I mean, I'm from India and I'm studying in the US. I face a lot of like cultural shock in many different ways. And I think the most important one is like when I'm talking to Americans, my accent sort of changes because it's not because I want to do, it just happens because they sometimes literally it's hard to communicate otherwise. Like simply at Starbucks, like I sometimes have to change, just make a short like version of my name. My name's very short, but like sometimes I feel like I pronounce it wrong or they're hearing it wrong. So I was wondering if these are things that you have experienced, and if you've experienced this, like my question before, do you feel like you have to change yourself in order to, like make other people understand you better? And some things like simple things like I understand kilometers, right? I understand kgs instead of like pounds and stuff. So small things like this, like do you experience them as well, and how do you deal with it?
I would say the name thing for sure. Like I've had like multiple versions of my name spelled on paper. So I've just like become like used to the fact that whenever I say it, when people ask like, oh, what's your name or what's the name for the author, I just like say it and then I start spelling it like right off the bat because I'm just like, yeah, I'm not about to like have that conversation today. But so I did mention earlier about how like I went to most of my schooling in Sierra Leone, and which is mostly like British curated. So my first essay that I wrote in my English class in high school in Fontana, so California here, I had like a lot of red marks. My teacher marked like a lot of red marks on it. And then I was like, this is a really good paper. Like, why? What the hell? And then I looked at it, and then all of them were spelling corrections. So they were all like for American words. So like color, O versus U in them. So all of the things she marked, like at that I spelled wrongly, were all because they were spelled like according to like British standards and stuff. So with time, I had to like learn how to like come from that. Even up till now, I still use like a lot of like British spellings and stuff on things that I write, but I have to like make the conscious effort like going through them and making sure like I'm organizing it well, because I do know I don't know if like everyone else can speak to this, but it's like American educational systems sometimes like have this tendency of being like my way is the right way. So having all the people like have put it in there, it's just like, oh well, you're in America, so you have to like write it this way or make it sound this way.
Yeah, I would say for me, there wasn't really an instance where I've had to change anything about what I do or say to get people to understand me. I suppose that's because, you know, I'm from a country where English is a native language, so there wasn't that much of an adjustment, but I can definitely relate to what you're talking about, because I do know people around me who are Brazilian, who are Chinese, who have experienced what you went through, where people have had trouble relating to what they're saying, be it in a cultural context or a linguistic context too. So I can definitely relate.
Yeah, to add on to what Justin and Wudia said, like it always depends on the situation I'm in. Like if I'm in line at Starbucks, my name's not Adnan, my name's Adam, just to make the whole process go faster. It's even though my name is not too complicated. But also like I find myself like in situations where, oh yeah, it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit, it's 80 degrees outside. I'm like, that literally means nothing to me. Pounds, yeah, I weigh like, okay, now I know I weigh 150 pounds, but like, you tell me how much you weigh, I'm not going to know unless I convert it to kilograms. It's little things, but it's also not too big of a deal anymore. I think to me, like it's just become a norm of life now. Okay, change conversions, change my name and to Adam. It's yeah.
It's a very interesting discussion, like how people relate in that regard. Thanks for everyone for sharing their personal experiences. Up in the chat, Simon asked a question, so I just brought it back down. So he asked, how did your friends and family abroad react to when you told them that you were becoming a UCLA student? And what is the reputation of education here that maybe like your friends and family abroad have of the United States? Okay, Justin, go ahead. Justin's eager.
Yeah, so when my friends and family first got news that I was going to attend UCLA, a lot of them already know of UCLA because UCLA is an internationally reputable institution. UCLA has graduated many accomplished alumni across the globe. So they were pretty, I'd say, impressed and confident that I was going to receive a quality education here. And the reputation of an American education, I suppose part of it's like romanticized. I wouldn't say an American education is that different from higher education in some other countries, like say for instance, you know, higher education in the UK or higher education in Canada or even in some European countries. But I would say since America had had and has a lot of cultural sort of soft power. A lot of people sort of get a little too attached to the romanticized version of an American education. But most of my friends and family were confident that that I'm going to receive a quality education here.
So for me, particularly, when I told my family I was going to go attend UCLA, that honestly did not mean too much to my family. I think in Jordan, like in the Middle East in general, the fact that you're getting an education in the United States is the biggest thing. So it could have been any university in the United States. It's not that it's not reputable in Jordan. It's just it's not widely known in a way, I guess, from a bunch of people. It's just the fact that you're going, and the idea of like, wow, this is a much better education system than Jordan. I don't think so. It's as Justin said, but like it's just the idea that you went outside and then you come back and you go to an employer like, yes, I got an education in the United States. That puts you way above someone who graduated from a university, a local university. I'm not particularly sure. It's just that there's this idea that American education is much higher quality than local education.
Same. I 100% agree with Adnan. Like, for me, so I am first generation, right? So for my parents, my mom to be specific, like she was just happy that I got into college, first of all. Like she was just really happy that I got into college. So it wasn't about that. I had to explain like how UCLA was and all of that. So, but she was really just excited that I got into college. And I would say, if anything, I get more of that like the UCLA like influence or like the prestige about it from here in California. Like when I go back home in Fontana, which is like in the IE where I used to live, just telling people like, oh, where do you go to school? Like UCLA, like, oh my God, like, cause Fontana is like a little bit like closed off town a little, it's not like a city town. So it's quite not very common to see people from there going to like a lot of like public universities outside of the town, well, outside of like the county specifically. So if anything, I get it more from people around here when you say like, oh, I go to UCLA, like, oh, nice, how did you get in, or stuff like that. They just like start asking questions. But from my parents and people back home, it's just like very excited that I go to college in the US for the most part, I would say.
Thank you for all those responses. Elizabeth left a question that I think I want to kind of expand on about would a non-American but non-local education be impressive as well. I want to ask your guys' opinion from an international perspective. Do you believe that international education or going abroad to get an education for, I would say like a longer period of time than a semester, for example, is more emphasized in international communities compared to the US, where in the US, like Americans go for one semester, they live, oh, I got to see this one culture, like go visit museums and stuff. Whereas in other countries, the emphasis is on if you get an international education, you're more likely to be have higher job prospects. Or any comments on that?
I can go first for this one. So I think it's more important, or at least where I'm from, that where you graduate, like where does your degree come from? Like if it comes from, let's say you graduate from a Jordanian university, but you ended up having a semester in Germany, a semester in Spain, a semester in the US, it's not going to matter too much, like employment wise. But if you went and graduated from a different university from outside of Jordan, it's going to be like, wow. As for the question Elizabeth had in the chat, it's as long as the country that you're going to has like some sort of like, not economic, like is better off economically in a way than Jordan, like most of Europe and North America. If you go anywhere there and say, oh yeah, I got a degree in something that's applicable in Jordanian society, or like more, not like better, like not better majors, but like more majors that people strive to go towards, like doctor, engineer, lawyer, all that stuff, then it's very impressive. Like you went out of your way, you went, understood went to a different culture, understood, and then came back to share your knowledge with everyone else in the country or in the job.
Yeah, I would say in Oceania, especially in Australia and New Zealand, there isn't a particular emphasis on going overseas to receive higher education, just because both countries, we have reputable universities, like internationally speaking. In fact, we are a pretty common destination for people seeking an overseas education. So I'd say for those who particularly want to seek an education in the US, plan on working and just permanently relocating in the US, such as myself. So I would say it is common though among Australian and New Zealand college students to do a semester abroad, but I would say the emphasis of getting an overseas higher education isn't there.
For me, I think it's a little bit tricky, but I would say getting a non-American but not local education can be as impressive depending on where your final destination is, your prospective final destination. So for example, if you think you want to work in America for long-term and stuff like that, even if you do attain some sort of like education from other places around the world, it would be very beneficial to you to have some sort of like American like educational background or something that's like a bit more European or so, that has at least the same language basis, because I think language can be like a huge barrier for people, but having a multifaceted like kind of like portfolio or while going to like jobs or whatnot can be very beneficial as well. So I think especially in this new age of like diversity within like Western culture, within like professionalism, I think it's really nice to have like a diverse range of like education that's not only American, but at the same time, it's all dependent on like where you think you're going to go with it.
It's a very interesting perspective coming from the fact that, as I mentioned, like my summer, quote unquote, abroad because of the pandemic was virtual. And so it's very interesting actually getting the perspective of people who have actually come to the US or gone abroad as well in person. So I want to do a concluding question or remark to the panel, just in regards to what would you tell other UCLA students who maybe are deciding whether they should study abroad or maybe just work abroad for international companies, who maybe are worried about facing like different cultural differences and struggles and maybe not being comfortable with facing like the unknown?
What I would say is just keep an open mind. If an opportunity to work overseas presents itself and it also sort of fits your needs, or if everything lines up, I'd say go for it. But I would say at the same time, don't fear the unknown. Humans are highly adaptable. So long as you're not forced to change, so long as you're not really compelled to change, just like Professor Staub said earlier, I'd say, yeah, any form of adaptation isn't necessarily bad. I'd say, we just adapt to our environments, our surroundings. So I'd say keep an open mind and don't fear the unknown.
I would say you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So why not go for it, I guess? Like if it's something you're truly passionate about, I would suggest going to it. But one thing that I would like, I kind of like use as a precaution to people who kind of like are very fascinated about like the idea of like studying internationally or getting like immersed in like different cultures is like, not trying to like have that voluntarism mindset, because that's something that we see nowadays, especially coming from an American perspective and going to like different cultures thinking that you are the standard or you're some kind of like savior type of mentality. I think if you kind of like negate that coming from an American perspective, you would truly be able to like immerse yourself in like different cultures. And I think having an international intercultural experience, it's something that can be really helpful no matter like where you want to work in life or whatever you want to do. It's really enriching personally and professionally. So I think why not? I mean, at UCLA, you have all these opportunities and most of them can be paid for actually if you apply to the right programs. They can be subsidized or whatnot. So why not do it? I think after graduating from UCLA, there isn't like so much time to study abroad or have like all these opportunities because you're just like focused on like setting life straight or what other responsibilities. So I think if you're having it right now, why not take the trip? You know, it can be fun, it can be academic, it can be professional, it can be all of it together. So why not?
To add upon what's already been said, as long as there's no like major obstacle, there's no reason not to do it. It's at best you're gonna have an amazing experience, and you'll find that you really love the culture, you love the people you meet, and you'll have an amazing time. At worst, it might not be the best of time, but you get the experience under the belt, and if you do it the next time, then you'll know what to do, what you'd change, what you'd want to do. And I don't think there's really any drawback to it, to be honest.
So that wraps up our International Education Week panel for the Berkle Center Student Voices Around the World in 90 Minutes. I really want to thank all the student panelists and also Professor Staub who participated in the panel, had really great input, really fascinating from a perspective like of an American here, and especially for the Center of International Relations. It's really poignant right now in this tense climate of international exchange. And so what I want to say just for the audience is that this recording is going to be available on YouTube. And so if you want a copy of this, feel free to go on YouTube when it's published and you can see like all the great feedback and responses again. And if you're ever interested in participating in different study abroad opportunities and international opportunities in general at UCLA, the DASHU Center, the International Student Representative Office has really great opportunities just for international students, but also domestic students, just to get involved within the different multicultural communities at UCLA. And you can always reach out to study abroad office or any other office at UCLA. Does anyone else want to leave any lasting remarks on any resources they want to pitch to that audience? Well, thank you so much, panel. We really appreciate you guys coming today and tonight for International Education Week.